I'm Nate Eaton talking with Sky Borgman, who is the director and the woman behind the upcoming Netflix film docuseries called Sins of Our Mother, based on the Lori Vallow, Chad Daybell case. I actually spoke with you, Sky, a few years ago before this case even happened about Abducted in Plain Sight,
That's right.
which people in Eastern Idaho will be familiar with that story. So let's start. How did you learn about the Lori Vallow Daybell case, and what made you decide to jump on it and say, I got to produce something about this?
I mean, I think I heard about it probably from you, honestly, with your reporting. And after we talked about Abducted, I started following you and East Idaho News. And when the story broke, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Another story in this very small part of our world that's really crazy. And so I started following it, and then started talking with Lightbox, and they're the production company behind it, and Netflix, and everybody decided that it was a great story because I think there was so much that was out there that was very sensational. And I think you were one of the only ones really talking about it in a pretty real way and really trying to get to the bottom of it. And so many of the tabloids were blasting this cult mom sort of headline. And I was interested, as I always am, in finding out the hows and the whys, if possible. I don't know that it always is possible, but I was also really interested in Colby and kind of looking at how a tragedy of such magnitude affects whatever family is left behind. And Colby has been dealing with this, with the loss of his mother, with the loss of his brother and sister, with the loss of Charles, who he considers his father. And how do you do that? How do you reconcile something like that? How do you put one foot in front of the other? How do you move forward in life after something like this happens?
I remember chatting with you at the vigil for JJ and Tylee back in June of 2020. So over 2 years ago, you've been talking with Colby, other people that are connected to the case or that know people involved in the case. For those that have said, I know everything about this story already, it's been going on for 3 years and every development's covered. What's different about Sins of Our Mother?
I think it really is Colby's perspective that's different. I think, we've taken the story over the past 2 years and 3 years, really, and we've been able to sort of put all of the information together. I mean, we were certainly at a point last year where we were feeling like we had all of the pieces of the story and we were just about to finish the project when we got the whole big Arizona dump of information and text messages. And then at that point we said, we've got to put this in. There's so much more information here that really gave a lot more insight and a lot more specifics to, I think, to Lori's decline and to the methodology behind it and to the actual messaging that was going on back and forth, that gave a lot more motive to what we were all and still are sort of, expecting will happen, but don't really know for sure what's going to happen. So I think Colby's participation, his perspective, and also we're able to put all of the information that's happened in the past 2.5, 3 years together into 3 episodes and kind of lay it all out there.
Was that a challenge, knowing that you won't have a finished product with the trial ending or whatnot, or not, I guess not knowing, because you could have, and then things kept getting delayed? Or was the goal to just tell Colby's story as much as you can and get it out there?
I mean, the goal was to tell Colby's story as much as we can. But when we first started, my initial approach to everything was, okay, we're going to have this trial. Let's use the trial, like structurally thinking, let's use the trial as a framework to sort of unpack this story. And then as we were moving through time, really, and the trial was delayed and delayed and delayed, we got to a point, and it was a real conversation we had between Lightbox and Netflix and myself and the whole team behind this film, this series, that we weren't going to let the trial kind of hold us hostage. And we also realized it wasn't critical to telling the story because of the perspective that we were taking, because we were telling Colby's story. And so pretty quickly after we started working on it, we decided, let's tell the story the best way that we can and keep it about Colby and his journey.
How many documentaries have you done during your career?
Oh, geez. Uh, 4 or 5, I think, something around there. I think maybe there's more. I mean, I've done a few episodes for Unsolved Mysteries and some episodes on some of the anthology series. So maybe it's more than that. I'm not actually sure.
It seems like, though, at least the ones, all of your shows are hits. I mean, I mean, isn't Netflix every filmmaker's dream to have get picked up with, or one of the top distributors that you want out there?
I mean, it certainly was for me, I mean, I couldn't have picked a better partnership, really. I mean, I think I've loved so many of their documentary series, and I feel that they were such game changers in sort of making documentaries and stories like this available to everyday people. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, really, 10, 15 years ago, where documentaries were these obscure things that nobody ever watched. And I feel like Netflix has really changed the game with that. And I couldn't imagine better partners.
How does this story compare to the other stories you've done? Which I know is kind of an unfair question. I don't like it when people ask me and say the Daybell case got to be the craziest thing you've covered. It probably is, but to other stories I've covered, you don't want to discount those because every story is unique.
Yeah, and this one is certainly unique. I think that, look, there are a lot of twists and turns in this one. There's a lot of information I think that we still don't have, and that's not always the case with other stories that I've done before. This this story is still a story in motion, right? It's not finished by any sense. I don't even know if once the trial concludes, if this story will be finished. I mean, I think that there's a lot more we're going to find out. I mean, every story is unique, I think, and has a different element of it that I sort of like to bring to the forefront. And that's what's intriguing to me about all the different stories, is how does this story sort of insist on being approached? And so for that, I think this one's slightly different in the talking to the family member, having Colby at the head of this one.
And for those people watching, the other shows I'm referencing are on Netflix right now. Last I checked, number 1 or number 2, floating. It's The Girl in the Picture, and
Yeah.
I Just Killed My Dad.
Yeah.
Is there something about crime that fascinates you?
Yeah. I mean, I really don't. I mean, I know that the documentaries I work on are crime documentaries, but I don't necessarily think about them as crime documentaries. I think about them as human stories. And I guess humanity is really at its best and at its worst when it's surrounded by crime. And, you see the best in people come out, you see the worst in people come out, and you see all the shades in between. And so really, it's sort of looking at the human conundrum and sort of unpacking that as best as I can.
Sins of Our Mother comes out September 14th. It's a 3-part series on Netflix. Was it a challenge trying to get everything into 3 parts? Because there's so much in the story.
Yeah, it was a challenge to get everything into 3 parts. And, I think a bigger challenge for us, what we really batted our heads against, was what order to tell it in. Because to me, there were 2 very distinct, different timelines: the timeline that things happened and the timeline that the world found out about them. And so trying to really sort of find which one to follow. Do we have to follow one or the other? Can we bend those timelines? And can we really get the information out there in the way that's accurate and that still follows along and that keeps people interested? So that was the biggest challenge.
And what's the biggest thing you learned working on this?
Oh, I think the biggest thing I learned is you have to let these projects take the time that they need, because we were close to being finished with it. I want to say last October, November, and it was a big, huge decision that we said it needs more time and we need to be able to fold this information. When did the Arizona dump come? Do you remember?
Was that in March of this year? Or was it last year?
I feel like it was last year.
Or maybe October. I'm always out of town whenever they do it. I'm always out of town. And I remember being in a hotel room and going through it.
Right. Yeah. I feel like it was like fall, October, something last year.
Could have been October.
I think so. So at that time, we had to really sort of sit down and go, are we going to sort of take apart these 3 episodes that were pretty close to being finished and sort of add all this new information? And it was a really brave decision, I think, on the part of Netflix and Lightbox and the entire team behind it that we decided to take the time it needed.
Do you feel like you've seen or understand a different side of Lori Vallow?
I don't know. I still don't understand her. I think that, like I said, I think more to the story is going to come out, but I still have a really hard time understanding how she could have gotten so extreme in her beliefs to have killed or at least had a hand in killing her children. And that's something I hope I never understand it, but maybe I have an inkling more of understanding, but I don't know that I do. Do
Maybe
you?
we'll never know.
I know.
Um, I
It's
I think
hard.
I think I understand more about her today than the day that I met her in Hawaii.
Yeah, I would think that would probably be true. Yeah.
Yeah. Anytime you spend so much time researching things and talking with people on or off the record, you learn that there's much more to it than what we might see. And
Yeah.
that's the whole purpose of your docuseries, I imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. And of the reporting that you do too.
Again, Sins of Our Mother, September 14th on Netflix. I know a lot of people are anticipating it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope it gives a little bit more insight into some of the things that are more confounding.
Yeah. Thank you,
Any,
Sky.
thanks, Nate.